Go grab your tools because we are building this super cool radio jingle.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
I'm Jeff, the radio DJ dude, and everything you just heard, AI generated. The voices, the sound effects, all of it powered by AI. And the best part,
it's absolutely free.
Yeah, what he said.
We are on the air.
Here's our digital to-do list. Number 1, we need to write the jingle. What do we want the bots to say? Number 2, we hit up ElevenLabs and put those bots to work. We record the voiceovers and we try out this cool feature, also generating the AI sound effects. And then number 3, we head over to Adobe Audition and put it all together. Okay, sharpen your number 2 for number 1. For this demo, we're just producing one jingle. But come on, it's the Radio DJ dude. I'm not gonna leave you hanging with just one production element, a radio jingle. No. When we get to step 3, I'm also gonna show you how to transform that jingle into a sweeper too. But all these production elements start with the written word. It's your job to craft some short and punchy little positioning statements. But usually it's your station name, your station slogan, and any other fun iterations of that slogan. What's your value proposition? Well, we want to communicate that in the quickest, most upbeat, and fun way possible. Don't default to the mundane. Don't settle for the cliche. If I hear one more time playing today's hits and yesterday's favorites, oh yeah, right there, that's what that gets. That tired old nonsense that they've been running since the 80s still is being broadcast in markets all across the country. Come on, we're internet broadcasters. We're better than that. Leave that junk to the big FMs. What comes out of those speakers needs to delight. It needs to perk people up. It needs to deliver something unexpected, make them smile. And your jingles have that opportunity. How could you breathe life into something that is old and tired and make it new and fresh again? So a lot of times that just means looking at it from a new angle. You could still say,
today's hits and yesterday's favorites,
but phrase it in a fun, unexpected way. So for this demo, Triple X 80s, rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s. Now that we've got our script, we have to hire those bots to voice it. And here we are, one of my favorite AI voice-over generation websites, ElevenLabs. I love them so much because they really offer some of the highest quality voices out there. And when you're producing any AI radio element, you really have to prioritize authenticity. How real does this voice sound? Don't settle for junky robotic voices. No. Your listeners will pick up on that, and it really denigrates the listening experience. So always choose not only the most real sounding voice, but the most natural sounding read. That's equally important. And sometimes it takes some push and pull to get that natural sounding read by inserting punctuation marks in places you normally wouldn't, by spelling words differently, phonetically how they sound. So you really have to experiment. Like I said, it's a lot of push and pull, but the time you put in definitely influences the quality of what you get out. So don't skimp on this. So to honor the free value proposition, I've logged into one of my free accounts on ElevenLabs to prove that this is oh so possible. A comment I get a lot, I can't find that Valley Girl voiceover lady you use all the time. Well, she's not part of ElevenLabs' core stable of voices on offer. In your account, you have to go over to Voices and Library. And within Library, the search term I use is Valley. And my totally rad Valley Girl is Natasha. So from here, you have to add this to VoiceLab. Now she'll come up in your drop down of available voices. And when you're in the library, look for other voices. Some of you may want that big radio sound. You can even search by voice quality. Let's say we want to look for deep voices.
Do not go where the path may lead. In a world where AI voices sound like robots.
That would be fun to play with, but once again, only available for people who have an account. And my paid account is very affordable. It's $5 a month. So if you're serious about this, pony up $5 for 1 month, grab all the cool AI voices you need, then cancel your account.
The less effort, the faster and more powerful you will be.
You have two options to generate voiceover. You either type it in or you speak it in, speech to speech. Now, speech to speech delivers much more granular control over inflection, speed, emotion. So if text to speech isn't making you wiggle and giggle, you should definitely pop over to speech, plug in your mic, and say it how you'd like them to say it. But first, we'll try text to speech. So you definitely want to select your chosen voice before you generate speech.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
To me, that's pretty flat. Now, they do have this very convoluted settings tab, and talk about a credit wasting experience. These are random, unpredictable values. So it's just a lot of sliding, a lot of previewing, a lot of credit wasting. There's no way to tell how a tweak in the settings is going to actually affect the voiceover until you generate speech.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Very different sound than the first. So let's crank up the variability and even up the exaggeration a bit and see what we get.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Now, another trick is you may like the end of take 1 and the beginning of the read from take 46. So just know you have that option. Don't feel that this read has to be perfect at any one time. You can slice and dice, and I encourage you to. Now we can start playing around with punctuation. To add a pause, insert a comma.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
And that's not horrible. And that's the thing. You could hit generate speech 3 times, don't touch the settings, and you'll get 3 different reads.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
No thanks. But as you saw, didn't touch a thing.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
See, I like the beginning of that, and I'm sure I like the end of one of the previous reads, so I definitely want to grab that one. Now, here's a trick. If you click the download button from this play bar on the bottom, it's going to default to MP3. Come over to Advanced, click on History, and now you can download a WAV file, which I found it just sounds a little better. There's less compression artifacts. So let's download this baby. And then just play around.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
That's kind of fun. I'm not in love with the read, but I like what she did with Totally Awesome 80s. To give you an idea what speech to speech would sound like, because I haven't had great success with the female voices. So take a listen. Rocking your mullet with Totally Awesome 80s. My voice cracked there. Let's see what happens.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Oh, that was fun. God, I love the first half of that. I'm definitely going to grab that. It's very understandable. It's crisp. It's clear. And most important, I'd say it's at least 85% believable. You always hear me going on about the importance of authenticity and realism with AI radio production. And one technique that really sells this is to include at least one real human element. So in this first sample, you'll hear XXX80s. That is being voiced by a human.
XXX80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Having at least one human element helps to sell the authenticity of this radio jingle or sweeper. And I get it. A lot of you don't have a real human voiceover doing imaging VO for you. So let's just give this a test. I'd want to change the voice to a guy and see what we get.
XXX80s.
I kind of like his sound, but it's far from the read that we want. Because this needs to be big, it needs to be bold, it needs to be in your ear hole. This is where speech to speech comes in. XXX80s.
XXX80s.
Eps. That was a fail. Let's try Damon, and I need to do a new read. XXX80s.
XXX80s.
A lot of pushing and pulling, a lot of tweaking and tapping. And this is the frustrating part of the process, of course. But once again, how much are you paying for custom voiceover? Now let's go generate some radio production sound effects. Probably by the time you watch this, this is no longer going to be new. Every company is going to have a text to sound effects option. But at this time, ElevenLabs is one of the only players who are offering this. And it's a super cool tech to play with. Will my imagination really be brought to life? Well, we'll be the judge. Okay, generation uno. Oh, wow. I'd say, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Those are all pretty usable. That got a little wonky, but there is like the first half of that's usable. So if you like those, you download those. Okay, let's bring this down to 3 seconds. How about more creative? See what we get. No, I don't like the first one. These are random. I mean, one thing is to be said, no other station will have these sound effects, so they will be uniquely yours. Okay, last round. Interesting. Okay, let's take these two. I don't want to say it's a cheat per se, but not AI created, but equally free. I recommend you hitting a couple other sound effects sites and using the search term radio imaging sounds or radio imaging effects, radio production effects, because there are some great offerings out there. Now that we have all of our tasty digital ingredients, it's time to jump over to the audio kitchen and whip up these radio jingles. So we'll fire up my favorite multi-track audio editing software, Adobe Audition. Sure, you can pull this off in free applications like Audacity, but honestly, it's more challenging because you don't have the real flexibility of the multi-track layout. Yes, you can do some multi-track in Audacity, but it is challenging, to be completely honest. For production speed and ease, I actually have a template that I open every time I embark on a new audio project. It already has my prefab tracks. So off to the left, you'll see a couple tracks for voiceover with comp and verb. That means with compression and reverb. And under that, you'll see tracks that produce specific sounds for those voiceover cues. So if I want a chorus effect, I drop the VO clip on that track. If I want a flanger effect, I put it there. An echo, I put it here. Since they're already pre-made, it makes production that much easier. Then under those tracks for voiceover, I have 3 tracks dedicated to sound effects. And the final track includes music snippets, some intros and outros of songs that give me an idea of how these production elements will actually sound live on my all-80s juggernaut, XXX80s.com. I've said it before, for you old school radio dinosaurs like myself, the jingle versus sweeper controversy is very real. Technically, these aren't jingles. I know today everyone throws that word around and it's great for SEO, so that's why you see it in my title, Truth Be Told. It's how people today refer to these production elements. Now, back in the day, a jingle was a specific kind of production element that was sung by jingle singers. Technically, back in the day, these would have been referred to as sweepers or liners. But how I am differentiating between a jingle and a sweeper is the following. A jingle is a standalone production element that runs in between 2 songs, whereas a sweeper will run over the intro of a song. Okay, let's get into basic jingle or sweeper production. I don't want you to be put off by any perceived complexities. It's really a simple formula. We'll start with a sound effect, something punchy, something bold, something grabs people's attention right when they hear it, followed by a voiceover. It's either your station's name or a slogan. Then that VO is followed by another punchy sound effect, which is then preceded by a final voiceover element. It's a tasty 4-decker audio extravaganza. So in Media Browser, let's locate all of our AI goodies, and here they are. How do we want to start this bad boy? For the most part, your sound effects selection is totally subjective. Now, I think there are some hard, fast rules. You don't want to start with a really mellow, serene sound. No. The first sound effect should be a bold punctuator. It should grab people. And no, this isn't the boldest effect. I still think it's a nice way to start.
XXX80.
while I do prefer having a natural voiceover element in there, I will stay true to the title of the video and continue building this with our AI VOs. So that's the dude saying the station name. And I'm popping this on my VO comp verb track. And all that means is this track has the following effects baked in. So any piece of audio I put on this track will be affected by the effects in this effects rack. We have some EQ, some dynamics, which is mainly a compressor, and a little reverb. Well, this isn't meant to be a comprehensive deep dive on multi-track production and audio processing. There are a lot of other great videos on YouTube that could at least get you up to speed with the basics. But feel free if you want to screenshot some of my settings. But keep in mind, EQ and compression, really, they're very audio specific because every voice has its own harmonic range that presents different EQ challenges. At a minimum, I always run a high-pass filter. What that does, it cuts out any low-end rumble or any nastiness that's happening on the low end of the register. This is to try to soften some of the sibilance on this particular read of XXX80s. Well, I'm not going deep. I will give you an overview because for the longest time, I really didn't have a great grasp of what a lot of these audio processors did. So a compressor, the easiest way to think of it, it evens out the dynamics of your sound. It makes the louder parts quieter, gives you more consistent levels, and these are really your main settings. You have a threshold. You set a volume level above where the compressor needs to start working. So for this, any sound hotter than negative 8 dB will get compressed by a ratio of 3:1. For radio production, acceptable ratios, range from 2 to 5. I mean, 4 to 5 if you really want that heavy FM compressed sound. But if you're doing audiobooks, podcasts, lay off the heavy-handed compression. A ratio of like 2 to 3 is probably a more suitable range. Attack and release, that's basically the speed at which the compressor reacts. How soon does it engage, and then how soon does it turn off? Makeup gain is really important because when you compress sound, just by the nature of the word, you are going to be reducing the volume level. That means you need to make that up and boost the signal to suitable levels at the end of the chain. And that's what we're doing with our makeup gain. Compression is super important with voiceovers. And truth be told, there was many a year when I didn't know about any of this and my productions really sounded flat and like crap. So EQ and some good compression and a limiter will really help make your sound pop. And that's what you want on the radio. It needs to cut through the noise and make an impact. Like with any effect, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to overcompress. A little EQ goes a long way too. Now, this first sound effect element doesn't need to be heard for a long time. 1 second is probably plenty to establish it.
XXX80s.
It's a little low in volume. I want to boost that volume up.
XXX80s.
Okay, our next sound effect. This next one should really hit. Now, one thing you want to make sure of, look at the waveform. Let the waveform be your guide. 80s, this definitely falls off. So I want to boost the levels on that so you hear 80s.
XXX80s.
That's better. Don't be afraid to run audio elements over the tail end of the previous element. Like for this voiceover 80s, bring this in right at the tail end of 80s. It helps with the flow and momentum.
XXX80s.
That's good. This sound effect should come up a little more. And if we're worried about this sound effect being too loud, set some keyframes on the volume level and bring the volume down a couple dBs to make room for the voiceover.
XXX80s.
Truth be told, I don't love that both these sound effects have kind of a static theme to them. So I do think it is important to vary your sound. Make sure there's contrast between your imaging elements.
XXX80s.
But I think the intensity difference makes up for it and makes it totally usable. Okay, so we have the station name. Now we're going to our first slogan element, which is...
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s. Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
So we have a number of reads to choose from. And I kind of liked those final reads where she really got into it. When you go from one voiceover element to another, it's nice to actually change the sound of that next voiceover element. So we start with just basic compression and reverb on the station name. Then when we come to the slogan, I'm placing her track on the chorus track, which will give me a chorus effect, which provides some audio separation between all the voiceover cues. So let's place this. We don't need a lot of that sound effect cue. And we may want to set a volume keyframe to bring it down a little just to make sure it's not stepping on her voiceover.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
I'm going to bring her voiceover up a touch.
80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
I definitely don't like the end of this sound effect. And that's a great thing. Some of these AI-generated sound effects, they're not great as standalone effects, but there's parts of them that are very workable. So just use the best parts. Don't feel that you're stuck with what the bots generated. And then get creative. Combine different sound effects to make one cue. What I want to do is break this up.
Rocking your mullet with
Rocking your mullet with, and once again, to me, this is a separate thought. This is a setup line, rocking your mullet with, and the payoff is, what? What are we rocking your mullet with? Well,
totally awesome 80s.
So once again, a new sound with some flange and this scientific filter, which basically rolls off a lot of the bottom end. So it's more mid-range. And this needs a volume boost.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Little sibilance on 80s. So if we wanted to create a notch, like this is way too high, you see 5. I mean, some of that sibilance is definitely in the 8,000 plus hertz range. So I wouldn't want to be boosting that. If anything, I want to be bringing it down, narrowing the cue width.
Awesome 80s.
Yeah, that's definitely more subtle. Okay, good. Now, no one says you have to use everything within that read. The read of Totally Awesome 80s on this one is much more upbeat, more energetic, more positive. So I want to slide that in.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
That's great. I want to leave a little separation for another sound effect. Okay, so you can see this next sound 4. It kind of has a little ramp to the beginning, and you can run that under mullet.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
So that the first beat really hits after mullet.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome.
Boosting the end of this sound effect, which is a nice transition into this drum-based sounder. Yeah, that sounds very natural. I think that's great. Now this sound effect, like cold end, comes too quick. So there's a couple ways we can handle it. The great thing with drum-based elements, they're easy to loop.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
And another tip when you're looping music elements, when you just can't get the loop to be perfectly seamless, look for a peak in a voiceover or other audio element to bury the cut in. And most will never hear it. You wouldn't want to have this music cut on a soft part or in an area where there isn't any other audio element. No, I'm burying this
awesome 80s
on awesome.
With totally awesome 80s.
So you could choose to use the natural end of that sound effect. I don't like it. I want to throw in something a little punchier, like a breaker element at the end.
Totally awesome 80s.
That's way too long for me. It just needs to be a quick stab. So I'm gonna let's try cutting it.
Totally awesome 80s.
Once again, we may look at the waveform. If you're finding 80s is getting lost, bump it up a touch. To me, width is getting buried a touch in the beginning of rockin'.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Sound Effects 3 channel is different from the rest. I have a little reverb on this track because anything I place on Sound Effects 3 usually will be the final effect of the production element. And having a little reverb on that sound effect will create a more seamless transition on air when you go from jingle to song, versus without any reverb, it just cuts off quickly. I'd probably want to move this first element because I'm not thrilled that it ends before the voiceover, but as long as we have a little reverb on the end here, that will carry over until our next sound effect. So if you want to hear how this would sound on the air, let's grab some songs.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
I think that's totally usable. It's fun, it's upbeat, and all the pieces completely free, baby. So my initial promise included not to just stick you with one production element. Let's transform that jingle into a sweeper. So first, give it a listen.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Triple X 80s.
So what sounds different to you on that one? Well, for one, we added a little more audio pep by stuttering the rockin' your mullet line.
Rocking your mullet with...
And then I added this cool echo at the end.
Triple X 80s.
So it's a combo phaser echo effect, just with 80s. And it does come in right after he does say 80s. I did use new sound effects for this because, like I said earlier, sweepers are meant to run over the intro of a song, where jingles are standalone production elements that run in between songs. So I used a different sound effect off the top. So these two sound effects were blended to sound like one sound effect. You see the peak at the end of this sound effect? This is where you'd set your next start cue point in your radio playout software, like in RadioDJ. That would then trigger the song to start playing while the rest of the sweeper would continue rolling.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Triple X 80s.
Well, I'm not going into the playout software side. If you do put this in your mix, you need to make sure this particular sweeper element only plays over songs with suitable intro lengths, because you'd never run this over a cold intro. That'd be a horrible train wreck and sound crappa-delicious. On my station, Triple X 80s, I have a specific sweeper category in my rotations that only will load up songs with intros of a minimum of like 5 seconds or 7 seconds. So that'll always guarantee a seamless, smooth on-air execution. This stuttering effect is pretty easy to create. So let's come down the line here. Let's grab just the voiceover element.
Rocking your mullet with...
Well, not a hard, fast rule. It's best to stutter on hard consonants. It just makes for a better effect. So I wouldn't do it on the ruh. Just the ruh. That's too soft. So I'd want to really hit here when she gets into the ra. After the ruh to the ra. And then, so I cut it. I move this down, and in Adobe Audition, I highlight this slice, press the Option key while clicking and dragging the clip, and that'll duplicate the clip, and then I'll move it back into place with a slight overlap, which then creates a nice fade between the two, and I'll do that a couple more times. I want about 5 for a good stutter effect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for this, I could just bring this back. I don't really want a crossfade.
Rocking your mullet with...
Wow, that's even...
Rocking your mullet with...
That's very different from the one in the sweeper. That's definitely more pronounced on the rockin'. I think the first version, I didn't grab as much of the rockin' to duplicate. It was a shorter clip. But you play with it. It's all subjective. I think an audio upgrade to that jingle would be to add a echo effect over 80s at the end, and it would sound like this.
Totally awesome 80s.
So that's a phaser echo effect. And the nice thing about that, once again, it smears a nice glob of glue between the production element and the next song. Very subtle, 80s, 80s, 80s will still be playing over the intro of the song. So there's 80s, so I'm Command K on a Mac, I'm cutting. I'm pushing down Option, and with the mouse, I'm dragging this down a track.
Totally awesome 80s.
Way too loud. So I just want to bring this down. It's just subtle. I just want a subtle echo effect.
Totally awesome 80s.
When we solo that, it still sounds loud, but when you're running that over sound effects, that's not going to be an issue.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
But the last piece of the audio puzzle is down here on the master bus. And this is really nice when you use a full-featured multi-track audio editing application like Adobe Audition versus Audacity. Because then I could run all my tracks through this master track where I use a mastering effect set up as follows. I'm once again making sure to cut out any low-end rumble. I'm boosting the high end just a touch, 1 dB, just to add a little presence. But over here, this is where the real magic happens. I'm running everything through an exciter. And exciters really enhance the clarity and presence of your sound by tweaking higher frequencies, and it can make for just a brighter sound. But the main thing is don't overdo this. Otherwise, you could end up with harsh, ear-fatiguing nonsense. So a little goes a long way. That's why I only have it at 20%. Wideners really just enhance the perceived stereo width. It kind of expands your stereo sound. You don't need a lot. That's why I only have mine set at 15%. And this is a great one. Hit your mix one more time with a little more compression, and this loudness maximizer boosts the perceived volume of your mix without causing distortion. So by boosting the loudness, you really can add more punch and energy to your mix. Once again, use it judiciously. A little goes a long way. Use too much and you lose a lot of your dynamic range and you end up with a real flat sounding mix. So I park mine at about 20%. And the great thing of this mastering plugin is the final output gain. This is the limiter. I'm telling Audition, limit my mix to negative 2.5 dB. Once again, you need to find a level that works for you, but negative 2.5 is great for my station. I'll turn it off and take a listen to the mix.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Okay, now let's flip this baby on.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Definitely a brighter sound that cuts through the mix and doesn't exceed negative 2.5 dB, which is key. So once you have something you like, you set your in and outs. Oh, look at this. What do you think would happen if I set my out point right here? Look at the waveforms. I mean, I'm clear. There shouldn't be any more audio happening. But look at our effects. So if I set my out there.
Totally awesome 80s.
Ooh. That would sound horrible. It'll cut the echo off and it'll cut the reverb off. You have to set your out point to make room for the final decay of the reverb and the end of the echo. One more thing we can do within Adobe Audition is actually set up some metadata. So when we bring it in to our radio playout software, it'll be ready to roll. And then you export it to the drive of your choice. And if you're wondering how that hybrid jingle sounds where I use half human and half robot, well, take a listen.
Triple X 80s.
Rocking your mullet with totally awesome 80s.
Okay, now it's on you. Get to work and go build some cool AI radio jingles. And don't keep them to yourself. I would love to hear what you come up with. So make sure to post a link right down here in the comments to your radio station and share with the crowd. I'm Jeff, the Radio DJ dude. And speaking of sharing, I so appreciate you sharing your time with me. And if you got 3% of value out of this video, see how low I set that bar? I'd love a like and subscribe from you. Thank you very much. And until our next little radio rodeo, you keep rocking those mics all over the world.